I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to change the locks on my own house to keep my sister out. But life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs at you, especially when family is involved. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Emma, and I have an older sister named Sabrina. Growing up, Sabrina was always the golden child, the one who took risks, chased dreams, and supposedly knew how to live life to the fullest. She married young, had 2 beautiful daughters, and inherited our grandmother's house. I, on the other hand, took what my family called the safe route. I worked hard, saved money, and eventually bought my own house with a mortgage, using the $100,000 our grandmother left me as a down payment. "Emma, you're so boring," Sabrina would often say during our family gatherings. "All you do is work and pay bills. Where's your sense of adventure?" I'd just shrug it off. My house might not have been as impressive as her inherited property, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. I had my routine, my peace, and my independence. Little did I know that my supposedly boring life would soon be turned upside down. It all started about 6 months ago when Sabrina burst into my house one Sunday afternoon, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Emma, you won't believe the opportunity I've found," she exclaimed, barely taking off her shoes before rushing into my living room. I was in the middle of my weekend cleaning routine, but I knew that look in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she convinced our parents to let her go backpacking through Europe at 18, or when she decided to have a destination wedding in Bali that nearly bankrupted our parents. "What is it this time?" I asked, setting aside my cleaning supplies. "There's this amazing medical startup," she began, pulling out her phone to show me some fancy presentations. "They're revolutionizing the healthcare industry. Tom and I are thinking of selling the house and investing in it. You should do the same." I stared at her, wondering if she was joking. Sell my house? The one I'm still paying a mortgage on? To invest in a startup? "Don't be such a scaredy cat," she rolled her eyes. "This is a guaranteed return. Triple the investment in just 1 year. You could buy an even bigger house after that." "Sabrina, I don't know anything about medical startups or investments," I tried to reason with her. "And I'm perfectly happy with my current house." She looked at me with that mixture of pity and disappointment I'd grown used to over the years. "This is why you'll always be stuck in the same place, Emma. You're afraid to take risks, to grow. You're just stagnant." The conversation quickly turned into an argument, with Sabrina calling me a loser for not jumping at this amazing opportunity. When I expressed concern about her risking her family's only home, especially with 2 young daughters to think about, she just laughed. The day after Sabrina's visit, I went to see our parents, hoping they might talk some sense into her. I should have known better. Mom was in the kitchen making her signature lasagna when I brought up the conversation with Sabrina. "Your sister told me about the investment opportunity," Mom said, not even looking up from her cooking. "I think you should seriously consider it, Emma." "Mom, she's talking about selling her house, her only house, and putting all that money into some startup we know nothing about." Mom put down her spatula and turned to face me, wearing that expression I'd seen countless times growing up, the one that said I was disappointing her yet again. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" she sighed. "Sabrina is always striving for self-development. She's not afraid to take risks. But you?" She shook her head. "You're just lazy, Emma. You don't want to change your life for the better." Over the next few weeks, I tried everything to convince Sabrina to reconsider. We had countless phone calls that all ended the same way. "Emma, this is my chance to get rich quickly," she'd say. "Stop being such a party pooper. This is a legitimate investment opportunity." "Have you even researched this company?" I asked during one of our calls. "Have you talked to a financial advisor?" But Sabrina wouldn't listen. She sold her house and invested most of the money in the medical startup. With what was left, she and Tom took their daughters to the Maldives, renting a house there while they waited for their dividends to roll in. The photos started flooding my phone almost immediately. Sabrina on pristine beaches, her daughters playing in crystal clear waters, sunset dinners by the ocean. Each picture came with a caption designed to twist the knife. Living my best life, while some people are too scared to chase their dreams. This could have been you, sis, if you weren't such a chicken. Another day in paradise, while the boring people stay home. Even our parents got in on it. During our weekly family dinners, they'd look at Sabrina's latest Instagram posts and sigh. You see, Emma, Dad would say. You could be there too if you weren't so careful all the time. Your sister really knows how to live, Mom would add. It's not too late to join her, you know. The investment opportunity is still open. I sat through these dinners, quietly eating my food while they browsed through Sabrina's photos and talked about her courage and vision. Sometimes I wondered if I was the crazy one for not seeing this amazing opportunity they were all so excited about. But deep in my gut, something told me this was all too good to be true. 6 months passed, and the photos from the Maldives stopped coming. At first, I thought maybe Sabrina had finally grown tired of trying to make me jealous. Then one morning, I saw the headlines. Medical startup exposed as massive fraud scheme. Thousands of investors lose everything in healthcare scam. Startup founders flee country amid fraud investigation. My hands shook as I read the articles. The company Sabrina had invested in, had gambled her entire future on, was nothing but an elaborate scam. All that money, our grandmother's house, everything was gone. I tried calling Sabrina, but her phone was off. Tom's too. Finally, after 3 days of silence, I got a text from Mom, your sister's coming home. They arrived at our parents' house, looking nothing like the carefree family from those beach photos. Sabrina's designer clothes were replaced with wrinkled travel wear, and the girls looked exhausted. They'd spent every last penny they had from the house sale trying to maintain their lifestyle in the Maldives, believing until the very end that their investment would pay off. 2 weeks later, Mom called me. Her voice sounded strained, different from the proud tone she'd used when bragging about Sabrina's brave investment. Emma, we need to talk, she said. Can you come over? When I arrived, the house was chaos. Toys scattered everywhere, suitcases still half unpacked in corners, and the sound of my nieces running around upstairs. Mom looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. I can't do this anymore, she confessed, slumping into a kitchen chair. Our house is too small for all of us. I haven't had a proper night's sleep in 2 weeks, and I'm constantly cooking and cleaning. Dad sat beside her, looking equally worn out. Emma, we hate to ask this, but you have that big house. Before they could finish, Sabrina came into the kitchen. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. Gone was the confident sister who'd mocked my boring life choices. In her place stood someone I barely recognized. Please, Emma, she sobbed, grabbing my hands. Just for 3 months. That's all we need. Tom and I will find jobs, save up for a place of our own. I promise we won't stay longer than that. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The designer clothes and expensive jewelry were gone. So was that smug smile she'd worn in all those beach photos. Her daughters peeked around the doorframe, quiet and uncertain, so different from their usual bubbly selves. 3 months, I finally said, my voice firm. Not a day more. And I mean it, Sabrina. Thank you, she threw her arms around me. I promise we'll have everything figured out by then. You won't regret this. The first few weeks of having Sabrina's family in my house were interesting. I expected them to immediately start job hunting, but that's not what happened. Instead, my house became some sort of social hub, with Sabrina and Tom's friends constantly coming and going. We need to decompress, Sabrina explained one evening when I found her and Tom drinking wine with their friends in my living room. We also need to maintain our social connections. That's how you find good job opportunities. But weeks passed, and these social connections weren't leading to any jobs. Every morning, I'd leave for work to find them still in their pajamas, planning another get-together. Every evening, I'd come home to find them networking with friends. When are you actually going to start looking for work? I finally asked 1 month into their stay. You're so uptight, Emma, Tom said, scrolling through his phone. We're still processing our trauma. We need time to gain strength. Finally, after a month of processing, they both found jobs. I thought this would be the turning point, that they'd start saving money for their own place. I was wrong. Instead of saving, they started spending their salaries on what Sabrina called maintaining their standard of living. My kitchen became filled with exotic ingredients I couldn't pronounce, delivered by expensive specialty food services. I can't just switch to regular food overnight, Sabrina explained while unpacking a $200 grocery delivery. My body got used to certain things in the Maldives. I need to transition slowly. When the 3-month mark approached, I decided it was time for a serious conversation. I found Sabrina in the kitchen, ordering another exotic meal delivery on her phone. So, I started, trying to keep my voice casual. Have you started looking for places to rent? She looked up from her phone, surprised. Oh, come on, Emma, don't be so pushy. We need more time to find the right place. More time? The agreement was 3 months. That was the deal. Why are you being so selfish? She frowned. We need to find a place that's in the right school district for the girls. These things take time. And how many places have you actually looked at? Her silence was answer enough. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. Emma, Sabrina told me you're trying to kick them out, she said accusingly. I'm not kicking them out, Mom. The agreement was 3 months. It's been 3 months. She has small children, Emma. You can't just send them out on the street. What kind of sister are you? I closed my eyes, feeling a headache coming on. Fine, I said finally. 3 more months. But that's it. This is the last extension they're getting. You're doing the right thing, Mom said, her voice softening. They're family, after all. Family. That word was starting to feel more like a burden than a blessing. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a huge mistake. When the utility bills arrived that month, I nearly had a heart attack. The numbers were more than triple what I usually paid. Water usage had skyrocketed, electricity consumption was through the roof, and don't even get me started on the heating bills. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by bills, doing calculations that made my head spin. My mortgage payment was already substantial. I'd put down $100,000 from my grandmother's inheritance as a down payment, but the monthly payments were still significant. Now, with 4 additional people in the house, my utilities had become another massive expense, one I hadn't planned for. Sabrina, I called out one evening, bills in hand. We need to talk about these. She glanced at the papers, then back at her phone. Oh, those look high. They are high, very high. I think it's reasonable that you and Tom help with them, considering you're both working now. She looked at me as if I'd suggested she give up oxygen. Emma, we're trying to save money for our own place, remember? We can't afford to pay bills right now. Besides, everything will work out. Stop worrying so much. But I had plenty to worry about. On top of the financial strain, I'd somehow become an unpaid babysitter. Every weekday followed the same exhausting routine. Our parents would pick up the girls from school and watch them until I finished work. Then, instead of going home to relax, I'd drive to our parents' house to collect my nieces. I'd take them back to my house, help them with homework, make dinner, and wait. And wait. And wait. Sabrina and Tom were supposed to be home by 6 p.m., but they rarely arrived before 9 p.m. Sorry we're late, Sabrina would breeze in, looking far too put together for someone who'd supposedly been stuck at work. The meeting ran long. I understood perfectly when I saw the Instagram stories their friends posted, happy hour drinks, dinner gatherings, social events, all featuring my sister and her husband, while I sat at home watching their children. One particularly late night, after they'd finally returned home and the girls were asleep, I confronted Sabrina again about their plans to move out. The deadline for this extended stay is coming up, I reminded her. Have you started looking for places? She waved her hand dismissively. Everything will be fine, Emma. You really need to stop stressing about everything. That's not an answer, Sabrina. Are you even saving any money? Of course we are, she said, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Just trust me, okay? When have I ever let you down? I bit my tongue to keep from listing all the times she had, in fact, let me down. Instead, I watched her disappear upstairs to her room, my guest room, in my house that I was paying for, while I sat surrounded by bills I couldn't afford and a growing resentment I couldn't contain. 6 months. It had been 6 months of mounting bills, endless babysitting, and watching my sister and her husband treat my house like their personal resort. I decided it was time for one final conversation. I called them both into the living room one evening after the girls had gone to bed. We need to talk, I said, sitting across from them. Next week marks exactly 6 months since you moved in. As we agreed, that's when you need to move out. I expected protests, explanations, maybe even promises to start looking for a place immediately. What I didn't expect was laughter. Sabrina actually laughed. Move out, she said, still chuckling. Oh, Emma, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The agreement was 6 months. That was already double the original time we discussed. Sabrina exchanged an amused look with Tom before turning back to me. But why would we move? The girls love it here, we're all settled in, and let's be honest, this is good for you too. Good for me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Of course. Think about it, Emma. You're getting real-life experience in taking care of a family. It's perfect practice for when you finally settle down and have kids of your own. You should be thanking us, really. I sat there, stunned into silence, as Tom nodded in agreement. Plus, he added, spreading his arms wide, this is a wonderful house for a large family. There's plenty of room for all of us. No point in having all this space just for one person, right? They continued talking, making plans about future room arrangements and discussing how we could optimize the space better, but I'd stopped listening. In that moment, I realized something that should have been obvious from the start: they had never intended to leave. All the delays, the excuses, the promises, they had been playing me this whole time. I nodded along with whatever they were saying, letting them think they'd won. But inside my head, a plan was already forming. The next morning, I called my office and scheduled a vacation day for the following week. Then I started researching locksmiths. 7 days later, I woke up early and got dressed as if I was going to work. I waited until Sabrina and Tom had left for their jobs, then sprang into action. The locksmith arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. While he worked on the locks, I started on the bedrooms. 6 months of their lives had spread through my house like an invasive species, but I was determined to root it all out. I worked methodically, room by room, packing their clothes, books, toys, and all their belongings into cardboard boxes. Their expensive organic groceries went into separate boxes. Their toiletries were carefully wrapped and packed. The girls' toys and school supplies were organized and labeled. I was angry, yes, but I wasn't going to be cruel about it. By early afternoon, the locksmith had finished installing the new locks, and I'd filled my garage with neatly stacked boxes, containing every trace of their presence in my house. I stood in my newly emptied guest rooms, looking at the bare mattresses and empty closets, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief. As evening approached, my phone started buzzing with calls from Mom. I watched it ring and ring, each time her name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. Then the texts started coming. Emma, where are you? The girls are waiting. Emma, this isn't funny. Come get the children now. Emma, answer your phone. I turned my phone to silent and waited. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard them pull up in the driveway. There was the usual sound of car doors slamming, children chattering, then the unexpected jingle of keys against new locks. The confusion started first. I could hear them trying different keys, probably thinking they weren't putting them in correctly. Then came Tom's voice, "What the hell?" The knocking started softly at first, then grew louder. "Emma," Sabrina's voice rang out. "The keys aren't working. Let us in." I walked to the door, but didn't open it. "The keys aren't working, because I changed the locks." There was a moment of stunned silence, then explosion. "You what?" Sabrina screamed. "Open this door right now." "No," I said firmly, "I'm done. I'm done paying double utilities. I'm done being your unpaid babysitter. I'm done watching you waste money while living rent-free in my house." I heard the girls starting to cry, and Sabrina immediately used that to her advantage. She brought them closer to the door, their sobs clearly audible. "Listen to them, Emma. Look what you're doing to your own nieces. How can you be so heartless? Don't you dare use your children as emotional blackmail," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "If you cared about their stability, you wouldn't have gambled away their home on a get-rich-quick scheme. You wouldn't have spent 6 months avoiding responsibility while I cleaned up your mess." "Just let us in," Sabrina pleaded, changing tactics. "We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. Your things are packed in boxes in the garage. You can take them now." "You had no right," Tom shouted. "I had every right. This is my house, the house I pay for, the house you've been living in for free while lying to my face about finding your own place." They stood outside for another 20 minutes, alternating between threats, pleading, and insults. Finally, I heard them moving toward the garage. It took several trips to load everything into their car, punctuated by Sabrina's loud complaints and Tom's angry muttering. Just as I thought it was over, my phone rang again. "Mom. How dare you throw your sister out?" she screamed, before I could even say hello. "What kind of person does this to their own family? Sabrina should be living with you. You need to help your sister." "I did help her, Mom, for 6 months. Now it's your turn. Let's see how you like having them live with you for half a year." The line went dead. I stood in my empty, quiet house, feeling simultaneously terrible and relieved. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in 6 months, I could breathe freely in my own home. The aftermath of that night was exactly what I expected. Within days, my phone was flooded with messages and calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, Mom had been busy spreading her version of events. At first, I tried to explain my side of the story. I spent hours on the phone with aunts, uncles, and cousins, detailing the 6 months of financial strain, the broken promises, the constant babysitting. But it was like talking to a wall. They'd already made up their minds, based on Mom's narrative of the cruel sister who threw her family out on the street. Eventually, I stopped trying to defend myself. Let them think what they wanted. I had my peace back, and that was worth more than their approval. Then, about a month after everything happened, my friend Rachel called with some interesting news. "You're not going to believe this," she said, trying to contain her laughter. "Your parents kicked Sabrina out. Apparently, your mom couldn't handle it anymore. Said something about them treating her house like a hotel and never helping with anything. Sound familiar?" I couldn't help but laugh. 6 months I'd dealt with it, and my parents couldn't even make it through one. But the real kicker came a few weeks later when my cousin Jessica reached out. She'd always been the family gossip, but for once I was grateful for her tendency to share everything she heard. "Emma, you need to hear this," she said. "Sabrina and Tom found an apartment, but guess what they're doing with their money now? They're investing in some space startup. Sabrina's going around to all the relatives, telling everyone how this is going to make her rich. Says she's going to buy a house twice the size of yours." "Are you serious?" I pressed my hand to my forehead. "After everything that happened?" "Oh, it gets better," Jessica continued. "She's trying to get everyone to invest with her. Says it's a ground floor opportunity or something like that. She came to my house last week with all these fancy presentations about space mining or whatever." I felt a weird mix of emotions, frustration, pity, and something close to relief. Relief that I'd gotten them out when I did, before they could try to drag me into another one of their schemes. These days, I don't talk to Sabrina anymore. Sometimes I miss my nieces, but I know this distance is necessary. I see their photos on social media sometimes, Sabrina still posting about their exciting investment opportunities and upcoming wealth. I hope she'll figure things out eventually, but I'm done trying to save her from herself. As for Mom, we haven't spoken since that night. But through the family grapevine, thank you again, Jessica, I heard she's been singing a different tune lately. Your mom was at Aunt Linda's last week, Jessica told me. She actually defended you. Said she finally understands why you did what you did. Apparently, living with Sabrina opened her eyes to how difficult it is to share your space with people who don't respect your boundaries. I just smiled when I heard that. Sometimes people need to experience something themselves before they can understand your perspective. Mom might come around eventually, and if she does, I'll be here. But this time it'll be on my terms.